Pierce Brosnan. To millions, he will forever be remembered as James Bond, the man in the tuxedo, the elegant spy who walked through explosions without flinching, the perfect mix of charm and steel. But behind the silver hair and Hollywood smile lies a man who has endured more tragedy than most could bear in several lifetimes. At 71, he is a survivor of heartbreaks so cruel, they almost read like fiction. He has stood at the bedside of the love of his life, as cancer stripped her away. Decades later, he endured the same horror again, this time with his daughter. He has carried the silence of abandonment since childhood, the weight of rejection at the peak of his career, and the unbearable ache of watching one of his sons slip into a darkness he cannot rescue him from. And yet, he is still here, still painting, still acting, still loving. But those closest to him whisper that what comes next could drag him back into the abyss he has spent a lifetime climbing out of. Before we begin, I want to ask you, on a scale from 0 to 10, how would you rate Pierce Brosnan? Not just as Bond, but as a man. Drop your answer below, because the story you're about to hear is about far more than movies. It's about survival. Every story of grief has a beginning, and Pierce Brosnan's began in a small Irish town called Drogheda. Born on May 16, 1953, Pierce entered a world without wealth, without legacy, and almost immediately without a father. His dad, Thomas, a carpenter by trade, walked out before Pierce was old enough to remember his face. "I never knew him," Brosnan would later say. "I never heard his voice." The wound was quiet but permanent, the kind of abandonment that seeps into the bones of a child. His mother, May, worked as a nurse, trying desperately to provide. But in 1957, when Pierce was just 4 years old, she made an impossible choice. To earn a living, she left for London, promising she'd return soon. That soon turned into 7 years. In her absence, Pierce was passed from household to household. First his grandparents, then an aunt, then an uncle. Each new home carried its own rules, its own tensions, its own cold air of impermanence. He learned early to stay quiet, to be invisible, to watch more than he spoke. Teachers noticed his gaze often drifting out the window, as though the boy was searching for something he couldn't name. At 11, his mother returned, this time with a new husband, William Carmichael. William was kind and patient, a man who taught Pierce how to fish, how to fix broken things, and how to trust again. But for a boy raised in fragments, even love felt fragile, like something that could vanish if held too tightly. That same year, William took him to see Goldfinger. Sean Connery filled the screen with power and confidence. In that moment, young Pierce thought, "That's the man I want to be." By 16, Brosnan was in London, enrolled at St. Martin's School of Art. His dream was not acting, it was painting. He idolized Francis Bacon and Lucian Freud, and imagined a life in front of canvases, not cameras. He survived on toast and tea while classmates lived comfortably. Then came the accident that changed everything. One afternoon in 1971, he wandered into a small theater workshop where a fire eater was rehearsing. On a whim, Pierce asked to try. That single impulse changed his life. The troupe saw something in him: presence, intensity, the weight of a young man who had already lived through hardship. They invited him to join. Soon he enrolled at Drama Centre London, one of the most brutal acting programs in the country. More than half the students quit. Pierce endured, juggling odd jobs and grueling training in Shakespeare, mime, and circus skills. By 1976, he landed his first stage role in Wait Until Dark. A year later, he starred in Tennessee Williams' The Red Devil Battery Sign, a play that had failed in America, but found new life through his magnetic performance. His screen debut was humble, less than 30 seconds alongside Elizabeth Taylor in The Mirror Cracked. Paycheck? 50 pounds, but it was a start. He followed with a small role in The Long Good Friday with Bob Hoskins and Helen Mirren, a film that would later become a cult classic. Piece by piece, role by role, Brosnan was building momentum, but destiny had bigger plans. In 1982, fate intervened. Brosnan auditioned for a background role in NBC's new detective show Remington Steele. Instead, they offered him the lead. Overnight, this relatively unknown Irishman became a household name. The show drew 15 million viewers a week and aired in over 80 countries. Brosnan's blend of wit, charm, and quiet danger made him irresistible. Critics began whispering, "This man looks like the next James Bond." Producer Albert Cubby Broccoli noticed too, on the set of For Your Eyes Only, where Brosnan's wife Cassandra Harris was acting. Broccoli reportedly said, "If he can act, he's my guy." But timing wasn't kind. In 1983, Roger Moore agreed to one more Bond film, blocking Brosnan's chance. Then, in 1986, just as Remington Steele was cancelled and Brosnan was finally free, NBC revived the show for another season. The contract bound him. The role of Bond went to Timothy Dalton instead. In public, Brosnan stayed gracious. In private, the disappointment was crushing. What followed became known as the Lost Bond years. The late 1980s should have been Brosnan's coronation. Twice, the tuxedo had been within reach. Twice, it slipped away. Instead, he became a man haunted by a role that wasn't his. Not yet. For nearly a decade, Brosnan lived under the shadow of Bond without actually playing him. Critics called him the best 07 we never had. Magazine spreads dressed him in tuxedos. Even commercials leaned into the idea. Diet Coke once featured him in a Bond-style parody. The unspoken joke being that everyone already saw him as the spy. But he wasn't bitter. He worked. In thrillers like The Fourth Protocol, he proved he could carry intensity. In Nomads, he revealed an atmospheric, mysterious side. Each role kept him visible. But the whispers never stopped. When will he finally be Bond? Years later, Brosnan would call this stretch his apprenticeship in heartbreak. He had the looks, the charisma, the talent, but fate seemed determined to test his patience. Then came 1994. The call finally came. This time, there was no cancellation, no renewal, no sudden twist of fate. The role was his. Bond was in trouble. The Cold War had ended. The franchise was gasping for relevance, and the studio was bleeding money. If Brosnan failed, Bond could die with him. He didn't fail. He resurrected it. GoldenEye 1995 exploded onto screens with $353 million worldwide. Brosnan's Bond was suave but vulnerable, polished but dangerous. He performed his own stunts, including a 220-meter dam bungee jump considered too risky for insurance coverage. Audiences roared their approval. 3 more films followed. Tomorrow Never Dies, The World Is Not Enough, and Die Another Day. Together, they grossed over $1.2 billion for an entire generation. Brosnan was James Bond. His tuxedo wasn't a costume. It was armor, and he wore it flawlessly. At the height of his success, Steven Spielberg even considered him for Indiana Jones. But Brosnan declined. He was committed to Bond. This was the role he had fought for, the identity he had carried like a ghost for years. And then, just as suddenly as it began, it ended. In 2004, Brosnan was filming After the Sunset in the Bahamas. The phone rang. "You were a great James Bond," the voice on the other end said. "Thank you very much. Goodbye." The call lasted less than a minute. That was how he learned his Bond career was over. There was no conversation, no explanation, no farewell dinner, just a door slammed shut. What stung most wasn't losing the role. It was the truth he discovered afterward. For 2 years, producers had been secretly auditioning younger replacements, while letting him believe the future was still his. It was betrayal. The fallout was brutal. His value in Hollywood collapsed. Major film deals disappeared. His salary offers plummeted from $12 million to $3 million. Casting directors labeled him too Bond, turning the very role that defined him into a prison. At home, his children saw him cry for the first time, not over a death, but over a trailer. When Casino Royale premiered with Daniel Craig, Brosnan wept silently. It wasn't jealousy, it was grief. He later admitted, "It felt like I had lost everything all over again." But Pierce Brosnan's true heartbreak had begun long before Bond. In the late 1970s, before tuxedos and Aston Martins, he met Cassandra Harris. She was beautiful, quick-witted, magnetic, and already a mother of two. Charlotte and Christopher were her children from a previous marriage. Most men might have hesitated at stepping into that kind of responsibility. Brosnan didn't. He adopted them as his own. They married in 1980 and soon welcomed a son together, Sean. For a time, Brosnan's life was full, a thriving career, a family he adored, and a love that grounded him. Then, in 1987, the unthinkable struck. Cassandra began to feel unexplained fatigue. Tests revealed the truth: ovarian cancer. For 4 years, Brosnan watched as the disease consumed her strength. Chemotherapy, surgeries, endless nights in cold hospital rooms. And yet, Cassandra's dignity never wavered. She faced each day with courage that left everyone in awe. On December 28, 1991, one day after their 11th wedding anniversary, Cassandra died at just 43. Brosnan held her hand to the very end. That night, Christmas decorations still hung in their home. Their son was only 8 years old. The silence was unbearable. Brosnan later said, "It felt as if the ground had opened beneath my feet." Brosnan thought he had endured the worst pain life could give. He was wrong. 22 years after Cassandra's death, the same disease came back, this time for his daughter Charlotte. She was 40 when symptoms began. At first, it was small things: fatigue, discomfort. But Pierce recognized the rhythm immediately. He knew this monster too well. When doctors confirmed it, despair consumed him. It wasn't shock, it was déjà vu. The same corridors, the same sterile smells, the same cruel countdown. For 3 years, Charlotte fought with unimaginable bravery. She endured chemotherapy, surgeries, and endless cycles of treatment, all while raising her 2 children, Isabella and Lucas. In June 2013, knowing her time was short, she put on a white dress and married her partner Alex. It was less a wedding than a final declaration. Love would have the last word. 2 weeks later, she was gone. She was only The symmetry was almost unbearable. Cassandra had died at 43, Charlotte at 41. Cassandra's son Sean had been 8. Charlotte's son Lucas was 8. Her daughter Isabella was 15. The same age Charlotte had been when Cassandra first fell ill. History had repeated itself with surgical cruelty. At a cancer fundraiser the following year, Brosnan's voice broke as he spoke. "I held the hand of my first wife, Cassie, as ovarian cancer took her life too soon. And just last year, I held the hand of my daughter Charlotte before she too died of this wretched disease." The room went silent. Some grief doesn't fade, it multiplies. But death isn't the only way to lose a child. Sometimes the loss happens slowly, in silence, while they're still alive. Christopher, Cassandra's son and Brosnan's adopted child, once shared a close bond with Pierce. They worked together, laughed together, even dreamed together. But grief broke him differently. Where Charlotte found resilience, Christopher found shadows. Addiction crept in, dragging him down a path Pierce couldn't pull him from. There were rehab attempts, long talks, desperate interventions. Nothing worked. Legal troubles mounted. His face aged before its time. In a rare moment of painful honesty, Brosnan admitted, "Christopher is very lost. I know where he is, but he's having a hard life. He knows how to get out. He doesn't want to." There was no anger in his words, only sorrow. The sorrow of a father forced to love from a distance, powerless to save a son who wasn't ready to be saved. For Brosnan, it was another kind of funeral, one without a coffin, without closure. By the mid-1990s, Brosnan's life was a paradox. Professionally, he was James Bond, the most recognizable spy on Earth, adored by millions. Privately, he was a widower still haunted by the loss of Cassandra. Then came Keely Shea Smith. They met in 1994 at a party in Cabo San Lucas. He wasn't looking for love. He was still living with silences too heavy to name. But Keely wasn't dazzled by the tuxedo, the charm, or the rising Bond fame. She saw the man behind it, quiet, bruised, still carrying unhealed wounds. Their connection was instant, but not rushed. Keely didn't try to erase Cassandra's memory. She didn't try to fill the silence with false promises. She simply stayed, through sleepless nights, through anniversaries that cut like knives, through moments when grief nearly swallowed him. She stayed. They married in 2001 in a centuries-old Irish abbey. For Brosnan, it wasn't just a wedding. It was survival. It was proof that love could return even after devastation. Together, they welcomed 2 sons, Dylan and Paris. Keely became his anchor. When Charlotte later faced her own illness, Keely was the one who held the house together. When tabloids mocked her appearance years later, Brosnan defended her fiercely. "I love every curve of her body. She is the most beautiful woman in my eyes." For decades, she was the quiet miracle of his life. The one who gave him reason to stand again. When the Bond chapter ended in Betrayal, Brosnan could have retreated into bitterness. Instead, he rebuilt. For nearly 2 decades, he and Keely lived at Orchid House, a Thai-inspired Malibu estate they designed from the ground up. It became their sanctuary, walls lined with his paintings, gardens alive with laughter, a refuge from paparazzi. In 2020, they sold it for $100 million, setting a record in Malibu. Now Brosnan divides his time between a coastal Malibu home and a retreat in Kauai, Hawaii. Both places offer him what he calls the horizon, a view of the sea that brings peace to a man who has weathered so many storms. Mornings often begin with barefoot walks on the sand, yoga on the terrace, or painting in the open air. His canvases, bold, abstract, layered with color, became his therapy during Cassandra's illness and remain his truest creative outlet. They've been exhibited, auctioned, even used to raise money for charities. Family remains at the center of everything. Dylan and Paris are now carving their own paths in music, film, and fashion. Sean, his son with Cassandra, works in film production. Charlotte's children, Isabella and Lucas, keep her memory alive with every milestone. And though his relationship with Christopher remains strained, the love has never left. At 72, Brosnan maintains his health with discipline, a diet rich in fresh produce and seafood. Morning swims in the Pacific, long coastal walks, strength training, but nothing extreme. His aim isn't vanity, it's longevity. Enough energy to keep creating, to keep painting, to keep being present for the family that still needs him. Today, Brosnan is more than an actor. He's a philanthropist, a painter, a father, a grandfather, and a survivor. He has used his platform for causes that matter. As a UNICEF Goodwill Ambassador, he has championed children's rights and disaster relief. With Keely, he has supported Greenpeace, Oceana, and the Natural Resources Defense Council, fighting for clean oceans and climate justice. Cancer awareness remains his most personal mission. He speaks, donates, and advocates in memory of Cassandra and Charlotte, determined to turn pain into progress. Financially secure, with tens of millions in net worth, he is not driven by accumulation, but by contribution. "Life has to go on," he once said, "and if it does, you better find something worth living for." Time has left its marks: silver hair, slower steps, lines carved by both laughter and grief. But these are not flaws, they are proof of survival. Proof that a boy abandoned in Ireland, a man betrayed in Hollywood, and a husband twice broken by loss, could still stand tall. And when asked what defines him, Bond, Remington Steele, or Hollywood star, he doesn't point to the screen. He points to his family, his art, his causes. To him, those are the roles that matter. The world may always picture Pierce Brosnan in a tuxedo, eyebrow arched, pistol in hand, the perfect image of James Bond. But his real legacy lives far beyond the screen. It's in the way he shouldered unimaginable grief, yet refused to be broken by it. It's in the loyalty he gave to his family, even when distance or tragedy tried to tear them away. It's in the quiet resilience of a man who lost more than most could endure, but still chose love over bitterness, art over silence, and hope over despair.